All right. So let's kick off our afternoon sessions. Of course, our conference wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors, and they are both present to, inform you of the stuff that they have that help the sector, but they also contribute to content and are thought leaders and share their expertise and knowledge. And one of those sponsors is Redmond Solutions. And so I have Jenna, who's going to introduce her colleague Matt, who's going to share his expertise. So please welcome Jenna to the stage.
Thanks, Gavin. So Redmond are very proud to be corporate supporters of this year's IPR conference. For those of you who don't know us, I'll very, very briefly say that we support local government with technology solutions that help support efficiency and accountability and transparency in government. Over the last 20 years, we've supported some 200 councils. So we've been in the space for a long time, and the vast majority of our team all come from local government. As an organisation, we're very passionate about supporting the sector with value, and one of the ways that we do that is by conducting research. Most recently, we spoke to about 40 governance managers around New South Wales, talking to them about how they were using technology to build trust with the community. And one of the key issues that came up in that research report was around IPR, particularly some of the issues that Alison talked about before, such as linking individual performance with those higher order goals in the CSP and DP and OP, as well as how do we communicate progress genuinely with the community and engage better. And so for this conference, what we'll be doing is conducting more research. So I'm really out of breath. I think I've just tried to do all in one. We'll be conducting more research with IPR people. Hopefully all of you today are looking at best practice use of technology in that particular function. So if anybody has any strong opinions on challenges in that space, I'd like to talk to you. But for the discussion today, I wanted to introduce Matt Pearce. He's going to come up here and introduce the rest of the people that will be contributing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. What I'm here to do today is to really facilitate a panel discussion. So whilst I appreciate the nice words, I think the insights are going to come from the panel members. But I'll ask them to come up here now. So we have Michelle Jack, who is the Senior Corporate Strategy and Performance Officer from Wallandilly Shire. We have Luke Farr, who's the Community Stakeholder Engagement Lead from Lake Macquarie City. And also Rochelle Robb, Director of Corporate and Commercial Services from Orange City Council as well. Thank you to all the panel members for volunteering to come up here and share your insights and to take questions from your colleagues on the floor as well as we go through. Just to reiterate, I suppose, why it's Redmond Solutions, why I'm myself up here facilitating this panel and why we think it's a good fit. We really do look to provide solutions to councils that increase transparency, and the outcome of that is really to attempt to enable councils to build that trust in the community. That will be the core function of when we're delivering solutions, when we're evaluating or developing solutions. We know local governments are purpose-driven organisations, and community engagement really is at the core of delivery on that purpose and therefore building that trust with the community. And I think the phrase one of our partners uses is that government moves at the speed of trust, which is why we're elevating that in the conversations that we're having. I know through discussions that I've had already with Michelle and Luke and Rachel that they are also very purpose-driven individuals, and so are the organisations that they work for. So I think we'll start with really getting aligned. I've given you all a brief introduction, so feel free to elaborate on that with your background so that the room does get to know you. And also maybe a quick summary of when we say community engagement, what that means to you. Put us some context today as well. So maybe, Rachel, if you're happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I declared my conflict of interest earlier on. If I turn it on. How's that? No? Hello. Okay. So I declared my conflict of interest earlier on, and the reason I declared that is I actually come out of Premier and Cabinet, so my last gig was with Gladys and Barilaro. So I spent 2 terms with them, and I've worked on every single contentious issue across the state, from a community engagement program of work at a strategic, at a tactical, at an operational level, and at an election level too. So that's kind of my background. I moved to Bathurst probably 2 years ago and started work at Orange City Council 12 months ago. So I call it not the evolution, but the revolution. So I think I do stir or ruffle a couple of feathers, and I really appreciate any question from a state or a local context. But that's kind of my background. My previous roles were around transformation, and to bring that experience into local government and have a little bit of a different context is really exciting, to actually see things happen on the ground in a local community. So now I'm Director of Corporate and Commercial Services. That's kind of a bit about me.
Thank you.
Oh, and what does engagement mean to me? Not yet.
No, down.
Engagement. So my background is a journalist. So I started as a journalist and a presenter, and I was a journalist because I wanted to be the voice of those voices that couldn't be heard. So for me, engagement is about hearing everyone's voice, listening to it, and then actually acting upon that.
Thank you. Luke, you'd like to give us a bit more of a bio than I gave? And
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Matthew. Is that working? Yeah, so Luke Farr from Lake Macquarie City. Been at Lake Macquarie now for 5 years in the role of Community and Stakeholder Engagement Lead. For those of you who aren't aware, Lake Macquarie is probably paradise. We have everything we need and more. And with a young family, I can't recommend it enough for anyone looking to do a change. Now that I've got that promotion out of the way. To me, community engagement, what is it? Well, it's not about being yelled at by your community, but it's about councils understand the importance of people having the opportunity to be involved in decisions that affect their lives. Now that doesn't mean that we will enact what the community tells us, but it is about the listening, and it's about setting a clear agenda of what we intend to do with the feedback that we receive, knowing that in most cases a report is prepared for our elected officials to make the decision, but the community offer invaluable insight to assist our council to make the appropriate decision or the best decision for the city. So for me, if I was to sum it up, it's about making sure that people are aware of engagement and have the opportunity to participate if they choose to.
And Michelle.
Yo, so you might live in paradise, Luke, but the Dilly is God's country. We'll say that. So my background is actually marketing. I'm a brand marketer. I worked for FMCG, so fast moving consumer goods brands, for over 12 years, and I made a break, and I've stumbled into a very exciting industry, and I think I've discovered a new passion of mine, which is IPR. Woo! Shout out to all of us. Anyway, so what does community engagement mean to me? Obviously, as a marketer, I hear community, I think consumer, and I think we need to solve problems, and that's how we do. But actually, what's more meaningful is, for me, community engagement is about actively building relationships. It's about listening. It's about creating really important dialogues. It's about being able to communicate and create awareness around all of the services that council provide, so that. And it's actively building. So it's not just something that happens every 4 years or something that just happens at a consultation period, but it's about pinpointing all of the opportunities that we have to communicate and build upon those relationships. And I think if we look at community engagement like relationships, we can reflect, are we just acquaintances? Are we married? And where do we want to be on that spectrum with our community, and how do we build up to that? So.
No, thank you. It gives us some good context as we continue the discussion. Jenna mentioned that some of the work we've been doing recently has been around gathering insights through talking primarily to staff in governance and governance managers at council. And in some councils, there's a lot of crossover with what we're talking about at this event over the next 2 days. So a couple of the insights, there's 7 key insights, and a couple probably related, outside of that straight governance space. And one of those that came up was, and this is really a quote, was that councils struggle to get engagement from the community in some of the initial stages. So I suppose we're talking planning there. And this can result in pushback on some initiatives when it's perhaps too late to change. So when the rubber hits the road, I suppose there. And then it's the perceptions that can create around either council being out of touch, or maybe internally it's frustration in teams who are pretty invested. So maybe an explanation of, and I'll start with you, Michelle, but experience of this, or anyone else jump in if you feel you want to add there, but and how do we alleviate it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good, it's a challenge that I think is common across all councils is, and I'm going to use the IAP2 spectrum that we're all familiar. I'm looking at Prue because she's the IAP2 spectrum guru. I don't know. Anyway, I'll stop because I'm embarrassing her. So it's about utilising that as a tool to be really transparent with our community. Okay, guys, we can't actually take on board any of your feedback because we're just informing you that there's been an accident and this is the solution that council has enacted. So unfortunately, we're just informing you this is what's happened. Can we consult with them? Can we engage, can we empower them? It's about using the IAP2 spectrum transparently, authentically, and also understanding that if we've come from a place where there is a lot of mistrust with council, distrust with council, that trust isn't going to be built overnight just because we've said, hey, we've listened to you. And this is the strategy that we've implemented because they want to see, because trust can be broken overnight, but it takes a lot of time to rebuild. And that's really around time, and it's around following through on what you say you're going to do. So that's when having a really strong communications campaign that constantly talks to them around, you said this in this consultation and now we're putting the plans on the ground. Or see that roadwork sign, that's because you asked for that piece of road to be fixed. It's about always linking back to, we heard it here, so we're acting there. Just being transparent, I think.
Yeah. And Luke, that idea of that engagement at the right stage between planning and delivery?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer, Matthew. We're learning in that space. We have, over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, identified, and we talk about over-consultation and consultation fatigue being an issue, but we've looked to identify really key projects that we know are going to have a great interest in the community. And off the top of my head, I'm thinking rubbish, and I'm also thinking dogs. Seem to be the things that really get communities riled up. So, you might go out and you might do initial consultation, or you might even go out, you go out with basically a half, a pre-draft of a strategy. The community give feedback on it. It then goes to council for public exhibition, and the strategy hasn't really changed from draft to exhibition. So on a number of projects recently, we've looked to go out with pre-engagement to get the community's thoughts on, is there enough open space dog areas? Is there enough fenced dog spaces in the community? What's working, what's not working? From that feedback, we then prepare a discussion paper where we'll come back with the community, check back in with them. Is this what you heard? Have we interpreted what you told us correctly? To try and iron out issues before a report then goes to council recommending public exhibition for 28 days. So the community are theoretically getting 3 opportunities to provide feedback, and I understand you can't do this for every consultation, so it's about strategically identifying what the community sees as a major project. So then by the time it gets to public exhibition for a draft strategy, the community have had the opportunity to be involved, have their say, see their feedback interpreted into the draft strategy. So then it potentially allows for a smoother public exhibition period. So for us, it's about bringing the community on a journey of potentially 3 rounds of consultation before we get, or 2 rounds before we get to public exhibition.
So over-communicate and over-communicate.
I don't know we talk about consultation fatigue, but the critical point is identifying projects that deserve 3 rounds of consultation to give you the best outcome at the end, both from the organisation point of view and the community's perspective.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll ever hear a community member say, you talk to me too much.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear them say, you don't engage with me enough, but you won't hear them say communicate. So I think that
Yep.
approach is good, where you're communicating to them. Yeah.
And look,
I'm
I'm
gonna
particularly
talk about-
interested, Rachel, with your different, the range of experience you're bringing in this space.
So I'm going to talk about the revolution. So I absolutely agree with my colleagues. The process, the IP, spectrum of engagement, the tools we put in place, but I think that sometimes enables us not to engage, but we tick boxes and we think we have engaged. I'm going to be a little bit contentious if that's okay with everybody. Is that okay with everybody or not?
Bring it.
Okay, sure? Okay. The reason why I say that is that sometimes how we get engagement fatigue, and we sometimes get to an end of a massive program of work and go, hang on, why am I now in issue management or crisis mode? Because we've ticked all the boxes, we've gone through the steps, we've had the dialogue and we've had the engagement. So when I talk about the revolution, the reason for that is we tend to be engaging with the same sector of the community over and over again, and we don't actively go out and hear the voices of the whole community and then actually get that groundswell of support. So when I talk about the engagement revolution, I reckon there's a book in this, by the way, but when I talk about the engagement revolution, it's actually about how do you have the continual dialogue and how do you actually look at the sentiment of your community, and data is a key point in this. And then how do you present evidence for good decision making and then be transparent about that. So the way that I'm challenging my team, and I'm challenging my team as well because we've been very traditional in our view of engagement, which is a process. We have an exhibition period, we engage again, we get feedback, we put a report up, we get a decision, we answer the questions of council, and somehow we get to a half-baked solution that really didn't kind of tick all the boxes that we wanted to do in the beginning. So I'd like to give you a concept of citizen engagement co-design and also citizen policy making. And this happens in the States all the time, and some of the European countries do it really well. But what it is about how do you have a continual dialogue with your community? How do you identify out of that dialogue what are our key priorities, and it becomes a strategic direction? And how do you champion that through the life cycle of a program, from project initiation to project delivery? And when you have diverse views, how do you actually bring that up to be transparent so you hear all views and not single views? And how do you do that in a timely manner that doesn't take 18 months to 2 years before initiation to project delivery? Because by the time you get to project delivery, you've forgotten about the initiation. How do we do that? I think it's about creating a continual conversation. I think it's about having a conversation in many channels, and it's about elevating those voices and having your data and your evidence behind it so you can go back to your agitators or your slice of the community that are very loud by actually bringing other voices to the table.
I think there's a book somewhere in that one. They've even got the title and theme for it there.
Someone write that down quick.
But the question you asked at the last panel I found really interesting, Rachel, and when you were talking about mini budgets and changes coming in and how quickly that might happen in some cases or has to happen. I think you had the example of grant funding coming in and it might change priorities. And it goes to a point that you were making, I think, Michelle, that, did you do what you said? And when that changes, how do we fit that into that community engagement strategy, particularly if we did a lot of engagement right up front?
Yeah, and how do you actually amplify your leaders, so your elected representatives? Because I think there was someone who said, my elected representative says that I am the voice of the community, and if you don't like it, go and elect somebody else. I think it was... We're going to have a great conversation over dinner, by the way, you and I reckon. But I think that's really true, because sometimes we don't respect the role of an elected representative, and I just want to talk about that around grant funding and budget changes and community engagement. So we set an IPR, we have a community strategic plan, we've got a delivery plan, we've got an operational plan that's a larger budget line items. And then suddenly government says, what are we now? What date was it? October, September? Where are we now? October? September? We've got an election in March. And the phone gets picked up and they said, right, I need to spend, has anyone had this scenario? I need to spend $5 million in your community tomorrow. What project do you have and is it shovel ready? So Like, really? Are we really engaging the community? So my point to that is I think it's about having an overarching vision, and I think people talked about vision in their community strategic plans, an overarching vision that's agile, but also enables you to amplify your elected community members to say, we're doing this and this is how it connects to what you want, community, rather than staffers saying, here you go, Mayor, can you make that announcement and can you stand up in front of the camera for a press call on it? So it's that engagement too.
I think that's a really challenging point, and particularly this time of year, no doubt everybody's in the running for a number of grants, and so grants might, the actual project might sit in the operational plan, and then above that, the vision for a town plan, etc., sits in the community strategic plan. So council goes out and applies for grants, is successful, but then it's hard to relate that back to your community when we said, well, we engage with you in this high-level plan. And so it's happened to us recently, and so when it comes to the project level, we've had to sort of backtrack and establish community working groups to work through the issues of what the potential grant project means to that community. Because yes, it's all good and well that it sits in an overarching 10-year plan, but when actually it matters to the community and it's happening on the street, grant funding is amazing, but it's also important that you've got to engage with your community on what you're actually delivering as part of that grant. So that's the challenge. I mean, as an organisation, you aren't sure if you're going to be successful in that grant or not, but it's planning as if you are.
Mm-hmm. How much work do you have to do internally to maybe, if we look at where community engagement or consultation to, when you're talking box checking, is really prescribed, it's a compliance activity for some maybe business units out there that think they do it a lot. To elevate that to go beyond what's being, if it's important to do, how is it done properly and well? And I'm thinking internally that communication to think, well, are all your teams aligned with what some of the enthusiasm we're seeing up here?
Yeah, so for me, in the way that we've approached it at Wallandilly is, so we're talking about business units understanding their role when it comes to CSP. We're also talking about a community that we need them to understand that council, whilst it's doing all of these amazing projects in the delivery program, we also do these really, really cool services. So how do we make sure the two are aligned and that community understand everything that council does to deliver day to day, and how do our service units understand their important role in the organisation? And so the way we've done this is through a really integrated framework approach of our CSP and delivery program, starting with our community survey. We actually used Catalyse, and the community survey was actually aligned to service areas. So then we got community responses to each of our service areas. And so that then started the feedback into the development of our delivery program. Okay, well, this is what our community is saying on each actual service area. So then what do we need to make sure is covered in a strategy already, is covered by core business, is covered in the delivery program? And so our CSP and delivery program have been set up to say, these are our 5 strategic themes that are delivering to your vision, but actually, these are the core services that we do day to day that deliver to what you said you wanted. So this is what we're doing for waste, and we've got a waste strategy, and that's delivering to what you said you wanted. And so then, and so rather than every 4 years we're reviewing it, every time we do an annual survey, the delivery program stays alive because we're reflecting on what progress we've made. And so then when we look internally, we're starting our service area planning, for instance, now for 23-24, and we've got their service area resource plans, and in there they've got their delivery program. So they know, so each service area say, this is who we are, this is what we do, core business, this is all of the projects that we have that are aligned in the delivery program, aligned into our internal business enhancement plan, aligned to the DIAP, or whatever other strategies that they have to align on. These are what our challenge. So every year they've got this plan, like this is what we have to do, and they know their piece in the puzzle. So, it's not perfect, and we're continually learning things each cycle that we do, but we're finding it creates a really simple conversation to have. It brings people back to the community, understand what we're talking about. We're not talking in jargon to them. Internally, we know everybody's role, so we're feeling really comfortable and we're feeling really engaged, and we're all working together towards this beautiful goal.
That's a great answer.
Can I just ask, who runs comms and engagement in this room? Has anyone been called, could I have a brochure with that, please? Or can you put a spin on that for me, please? Has anyone experienced that as internal stakeholders with your other service delivery units?
Generally, they just say that's about talking to people, so that's your job.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make one point. I think it's about what I'm trying to create at Orange City Council is a level of professional respect, which means that the communicators are basically the people that can be the game changers. So if I look at community engagement, if someone's bringing my team into a project at the end of it and saying, can you put some spin on that, or can I have a brochure with that, please? I would say we're not actually participating because it's not engagement. And there's a difference between engagement, and I'll talk a little bit about, when you make a decision where you're not going to engage and you're going to actually drive a program, you actually have to then market that program and have a convincing case. The other thing I would say about aligning business units is, have you got your own narrative in place? So what does the other business units understand what your role is? So I'll give you an example at Orange City Council. We've got an urban renewal program called Future Cities. Part of Future Cities, we have a beautiful art program, and we delivered, I don't know if anyone's seen the Golden Spheres, and I've got some colleagues that come on. They've probably seen the stuff in the media about our Golden Spheres. They're a fantastic piece of artwork. But when we looked at the different units across the organisation, it's not a good news story, by the way, this is not a success story. The comms and engagement team were brought in very early, so we talked about initiation to project delivery, yeah? We had all the bells and whistles. So we've got our community engagement group, we've got our reference group, we've got our activist group, we've got our champion group, we've got our advocate group, we've got every bloody group in the world working on this program 2 years ago. And then we suddenly deliver these golden spheres, and none of those advocates are standing up there talking about this great art program. And we have a particular councillor who is a roads, rates and rubbish guy. Has everyone got one of those? Which is really important. And so the dialogue comes out, why has council spent X amount of money on these bloody concrete golden balls when we could have actually been filling some potholes? Is everyone in this situation here? So what did we do wrong? We were at the last end of the story 2 years on. We reacted to a narrative from a particular elected member, and we didn't give him the respect of actually giving him any information about the program before he actually reacted. We were the brochure with that, people. So we walked down the street with the brochure with that and said, hey guys, look at our beautiful art program. And then we turned around and the guy said, can you put some spin on it to make this go away? So we don't have accountability, we don't have transparency, we're not leading our narrative. So if you want to be a player and you want to sit at the table, then I think you need to advocate your case and have that professional respect and say, what am I delivering to you as value? Why do I need to be at the table? Because I'm your storyteller, I'm your narrator, I'm the one who knows your community.
I think it probably leads to a comment as well that you made, Michelle, and I'll be... Again, Rachel, I think with what you were just talking about then, how do you ensure and Luke, you mentioned the idea that it's community engagement at the beginning, part of that was out there making sure you communicate and tell that story. Well, it's not just asking people what they want, it's sharing that vision and being bigger, but how do you ensure that's authentic?
It's a great question, and for us, we're very fortunate that it comes from the top of our organisation. Our executive see the value of undertaking good community engagement and not just undertaking community engagement to tick a box exercise. So a recent example of that, I'm sure many of you are all involved in preparing your community engagement to prepare your community engagement strategy. Classic local government, just another strategy. So basically, as you're aware, under IPR guidelines, we have to, in the first term of a new council, have adopted a community engagement strategy that the community has been involved in developing. We gained support from our executive to do something a little bit different. It was called the Lake Mac 100 Voices Community Summit, where we brought together 100 diverse community members from across the city to participate in a one-day summit to help us prepare our draft community engagement strategy. And so that one-day summit allowed us to be transparent and talk to the community about why we are here, what we intend to do with their feedback, and how them giving up a day of their time on a Saturday will help us not just prepare our strategy, but future community engagement projects. It was a big project. So to get 103 people on the day, we sent out 10,000 information flyers, a massive social media campaign. to ask people to express their interest in being involved in the summit. We got 367 expressions of interest for people wanting to be involved. And then from that, we selected 115 community members who were diverse and represented, age, sex, gender, socio-economic status, location across the city, to give us 103 representatives on the day. We did offer a $100 gift voucher, which assisted attendance and provided some pretty exceptional muffins during the summit as well. But for that, Matt, it really allowed us to be transparent with our community and build trust. And the community were able to debate each other, and the room was able to moderate itself. And when we talk about the squeaky wheels, we often hear from the squeaky wheels, but it was great that we had some well-oiled wheels on the day, and they were able to take the squeak out of a number of the older demographic that we hear from so often.
So you're suggesting that you gave them some wine and beer as well?
Unfortunately, that was after the summit finished, but just non-alcoholic beverages and muffins during the summit.
If I can just, because something that I picked up on from what Luke was saying around making sure there's 100 diverse voices in the room, and also to what Rachel was saying around, you had this project and the community didn't like it, and then we were in reactive mode. I think the difference in there is when you have an engagement strategy, when you feel really confident that the feedback you're receiving or the voices and opinions that you're hearing are, valid, representative, and that you can incorporate them into your strategies, you can trust in the direction a little bit more, and not and then I don't know, Rachel, what you think, but then to not be reactive. And because we find ourselves in that situation all the time, we've got to react to the noise, like that one person on Facebook who's squawking about something or other. We have to react to that. Well, actually, no. We've developed a strategy, we've developed a process with a lot of community engagement, and we know that the community are behind what we're saying. Let's not turn this massive boat around just because of this one person. I don't know,
Yeah, I reckon that's a really good example. Anyone heard about Stadia? Anyone lived Stadia? Anyone lived Regional Growth Fund? Anyone lived through regional funding pork barrelling? That's example of the reaction piece. And this is obviously Chatham House rules, isn't it? Yeah.
No, it's been, yeah.
It's really important, and I think for us when we went through this, and it's really difficult, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's really difficult coming from different lenses and different experiences and then applying that in a localised area very, very quickly, because when I walked into council, it was like, why are we doing it this way? And there's reasons why we're doing it this way, and some of them are very relevant and some of them are not. My point is that I think there is still this cloak around engagement, and I'm going to put communications in this. So when I walked into council, I said, so what's our narrative? What's our story? So that comes from your strategy. It's about the engagement. It's about really having a direction. And everyone looked at me and said, well, we can't create our own narrative. All we do is, the media, regional media, publishes a story, and Orange has the most regional media across New South Wales. So for my metro people, for me, if it wasn't in the Telegraph or the Sydney Morning Herald, or if I'm not, on Brekkie Radio, I'm sleeping in. So the fact that we have a regional story is suddenly causing a major reaction and changing a strategy was a little bit of a surprise to me. But the reason for that is because we hadn't created our narrative. We did all the work, we've ticked all the boxes, we've got the plan, we've got the strategy, but we didn't invest in the narrative. And so for us, we have a new mayor, we had a new set of councillors, so they weren't part of that initial engagement. I'll just use that example around the arts program 2 years ago that had the 150 people and the 3 subcommittees and the advocates in our arts and cultural community who wanted to make this a tourism plan pillar that then lead into an Orange 360 strategy. And my Cabong colleagues are going to understand what I'm saying here, and then our DMP and rah. So we did everything great. But when the rubber hit the road, we didn't have engagement from our mayor. So I talk about the importance of elected representative. So he wasn't part of the story. So then we react. And then when you've got a new council and you've got, and you haven't socialised your strategic direction or your narrative or your community stories, that's when things change really, really quickly. So I want to give you a good news story to the bad news story. So what we did was we had the little blip of the crisis and we were all talking about the golden balls. And then suddenly these pictures are coming on social media of kids playing on the golden balls and, people patting the golden balls and people going through around the golden spheres, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, well, now we've got an art program delivering. I don't want to be actually investing in the next phase of the art program because I don't want to have more negative press. So what we've worked to do is to actually create the narrative with our new councillors and with our new mayor, and to actually be proactive. So a lot of people, I think, particularly in local government, go, don't say anything and it will all go away. Just don't say anything. And we're saying, man, we're saying it loud and proud, and you bring it on, and we will kind of, bring the conversation to you, and let's have the conversation. And then if the community really says, you know what, we've got too many potholes right now, well, we might have to be a bit agile and think about, slowing down our art program delivery.
No, I think that, I mean, to speak to that question that would lead to this was around authenticity. That is examples of being clear in communication, being authentic probably is a big part of that, and not having the comms teams that will help massage things. And certainly, Luke, your example there of, a community forum to genuinely put the effort in. I think the other thing you spoke to there was something else that probably ties back to a comment earlier as well, but our communities are increasingly diverse, or where people are more aware of diversity in the community. And you spoke about deliberate effort there to get a diverse forum together. But how, and this is a how question, but because we know we have to, how do we ensure that every voice is heard or has the opportunity to be heard? And that could be any three of you. I'm just asking that to the panel.
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? As an engagement practitioner, you can try all you like to attempt to engage your whole community, but if the story or the messaging doesn't resonate, then you've missed the boat. So, for example, a 10,000 mail out that we did, it wasn't going to attract a younger audience. So we had to undertake an extensive social media campaign to attract, the younger demographic to give up their Saturday morning. We had to engage our youth council, and the youth council is not for every young person, but offering a $100 incentive that assisted. But it's also about accessing the relevant person in your organisation who is that touch point for a diverse demographic. And it's about making sure that your engagement, the way you're seeking feedback, is accessible to everybody. We're very reliant on online engagement now, particularly post-COVID-19, and more people are now have access to online capability because of what they learnt during COVID, but it doesn't suit everybody. If we're going to engage our Indigenous community, then we'll have to look at the contact within the organisation to tee up a meeting with an elder, potentially at their home. So it's about going to their place, making them feel welcome. You're not going to, I'm not going to sit here and say in every engagement we get such a great diverse representation, because it's not the case. But it's about trying to learn from your failures and make sure that you are putting in the best effort to engage your whole community to the best of your ability.
And just to further that, for me, it really comes back to, so we're talking about a diverse community. It should not be first and foremost, I want you to know this message. Needs to be, who are you even? Like, who are these different groups of people that I'm speaking to? What's in it for them? And this is my marketing hat on, but what is in it for them? What's relevant to them? Why do they care about this strategy? And then speaking to them at that point, not necessarily like, I need you to understand my local strategic planning statement. It's really, really good because we're a growing community and you're part of this growing community. No, it's about, okay, you have just moved here from metropolitan, you're on a fringe now. This is a rural country. You're going to be chasing tractors down the road. Let me explain to you a little bit about this environment. But first, let me hear and understand about you, because it's when you can, it's come back to, if we're actively building relationships, we need to understand who it is that we're building a relationship with, for them to have any chance of leaning in to any kind of communication first, and then to be engaged with, and then to formulate and have meaningful input into whatever it is that we're asking them for.
I agree with all of that. I think also it's about being real. So first of all, do you know who your community is? Do you know the segmentation? So I like the marketing principles and I like the KISS principles as well. So what's your market segmentation? Who's your community? Who are they? Where do they live? What do they do? But then my next question is, who don't you hear from? So we went through our community strategic plan with a little bit of a challenge of let's get the roads, rates and rubbish conversation out the road straight away. And once we got the roads, rates and rubbish conversation out the way, we were able to engage with our community on a vision statement. And what we tried to do in a very short period of time was we tried to seek out the voices that we never hear from. And it was in situ. So we had, for example, teams go down to playgrounds and go, hey, what do you reckon about this playground? And then mums and dads and kids would go, yeah, it's pretty good, but my child who's in a wheelchair can't actually play here. I mean, I'm sure everyone's got their same stories. Or, hey, that shade cloth's been rubbish for the last 3 years. It'd be good if we had a few more shade cloths. So sometimes it's actually just about getting real. And again, I'm going to be inflammatory, but we've created so many frameworks and processes and templates and check boxes and blah, blah, blah. Have we actually forgotten the art of conversation? And the art of engaging, not the art of engagement. So I'll just say that again. Have we forgotten the art of conversation and have we forgotten the art of engaging, not engagement? So, cut a long story short, did we do it perfectly? No. But we did it okay, I think. And we got our people to talk to people in situ. We did have some formal forums. We did have some, formal, meetings. We have a stakeholder base that we would go out and reach out to. We work really closely with state government. I talked about that a bit previously because from my perspective, you can have the best strategy in the world. If you can't fund it, you'll never deliver it. So how do you actually get those connection points up front? And then we actively sought the voices of people that never, ever, ever get heard. So we had the community going, oh, we don't need diversity in this community. We're friggin' 40, 50, 60-year-old white males on the farm. No offence to Orange community, by the way, and if anyone says I said that, I will deny it. And why would we want to have a rainbow walk, for goodness sake? We went down to our kids who came into the council chambers, and we have such bright kids. And they went, the key issue for my community is that you don't recognise my diversity. There is nothing for LGBTIQ kids in this town. Two completely different diverse views. If we didn't get a group of high school students to come in and have a chat and actually feel comfortable to talk about what was important to them, do you think that's in our strategic plan? So I've got one part of my community saying, we're not a town like that, and we've got kids saying, I've got mental health issues, I'm not recognised, my diversity is not recognised, and you know what, I'm transitioning from female to male, male, female, and I don't have any facilities in a female toilet for what I need as a male person at this point in time. So guess what we're doing? We're going now looking at all our toilets and going, how do we actually make them unisex toilets? How do we facilitate a transitioning person? That would have never come out of, I'm sorry, and I know I'm being inflammatory, traditional engagement. It would have not come out. So I challenge you to go and find the voices that are never heard and start to listen to them and then somehow create a narrative that then when you have the crisis or the issue or the blow-up, you can present that view to an elected representative in a very respectful way that engages them in the conversation.
I probably, it makes me think then, I know we're putting all three of you on the spot here a bit, but we know that's important and we've got examples there. How would you measure it? How would you know that?
Oh, sorry, I'm excited about that question.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm talking too much. Well, as the marketer, marketing's about science and art, yeah? Mm-hmm. So how do you create a case if you don't have evidence? So I think the challenge we have in local government is around resourcing and convincing our elected representatives and our GMs and our directors like me and my peers that we need to invest into data. So you need to be able to listen, hear, understand and capture. And we listen, hear, understand, but we don't capture very well. And if we capture, it's a narrative. It's not like trend data. So I think I won't mention all of this, there's lots of different tools you can do to actually monitor and measure your community sentiment. The reason we don't do it very well in government is because sometimes we don't like to hear, we don't want to hear what we're going to hear from that. So then you've just got to, in my view, in my past experiences, how you actually manage that politically. So is everyone familiar with Premier's priorities? So I had the real privilege of creating Premier's priorities, and one thing we were really clear about was what was our KPI on each of those Premier's priorities and how do we actually measure and monitor that we're achieving that KPI, and that's all about data, and it's one page. So yes, data is absolutely important. It's the science, because you can't make decision with clear evidence. And you know, there's a variety of ways you can do that. Surveys, you can do that with, you know, pulse monitoring. You can do it with a simple thing on your bloody counter with I keep swearing a little bit, 5 things where you go thumbs up, thumbs down. You can do NPS scores. You can do so many different things. You can have your annual, you know, citizen survey. But I think you have to capture data to make sure that you are actually understanding your community, listening and delivering, and then and be open to what they say to you, and be agile if you can, because that's about trust.
Yeah, I think measurement is, you know, it's the key question, and we all undertake the biannual community satisfaction survey. Shoots out a great amount of data, but if I come down a level, and we're talking about community engagement, at Lake Mac we might go out and consult with the community on up to 50 projects per financial year. So it's about, you know, the community telling us things in the community satisfaction survey. We're interpreting that data, but it's about looking at the data we're receiving from community engagement projects and ensuring that we're not going back out and asking the community the same thing that they told us 2 or 3 consultations ago. It's about representing to them that we've listened. We have, you know, we've provided you with an update on what we did with that feedback, but we're not asking you the same thing this time because we know you told us that, you know, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months ago. So it's just, for me personally, and I'm not putting in my critical high-level strategic thinking hat on here, but it's about making sure that a consultation doesn't finish. We use that data to inform that project, and then that data sits over there in that file because that project's done and dusted. It's about making sure that we're coming back to the data and we're continually, yep, our community told us this, so we can tell them we're not asking you this time because you've provided us that data before, and we've got upteenth million lots of different data sets from the community satisfaction survey, etc. So it's just being smart with the data that your community has told you, I think.
Yeah, look, I think it's a challenge that I certainly face, measuring what matters. When I worked at Nestle, how many packets of snack have we sold? Well, that's easy. But how do people feel about the cow on the front of the pack is a bit harder, and I find the same challenge in local government. How do you measure the vibe? How do you measure if people are happy? And you could look at Facebook as, you know, if anyone's like Wallandilly, we use Facebook a lot in terms of our social media channel, and you know, you start to see sentiment shift when, you know, you used to have hundreds of people pile onto a post and be like, hey, well, what about the roads? But then we've slowly seen a shift of, guys, have you seen that they're doing X, Y, Z? Like, you actually find some brand advocates, but community advocates. But to Luke's point just then, it's also so important to then follow up with the so what. You know, we've measured this, we've got these results, but so what? What are we doing about that internally? Again, this is not something that Wallandilly have cracked, but I'm passionate about it at work. It's around, okay, so we've just gotten this data. You've just told me that this has been the results of this. So what are we going to do about it? What change is being influenced by this data? Because it's when we can communicate that change, we're building trust, and again it comes, oh, okay, well I've had my input here, I'm going to make more input because I can see that there's actually something that's being delivered that I like and I can buy into.
So it's definitely an ongoing effort to keep gathering this. I was talking to a person working in IPR in council this week, and talking about the validity or usefulness of census data as a source of data, and the comment was made whether it had enough detail for what they needed at a local level for planning, and the other comment was, I wish I could run our own council area census, both to, I suppose, ask a bit more, but also to make it more up to date, seen as important, but whether it gave you enough. Is census data something that fits that, when we're talking using data to make decisions? And
so for me, I don't think it captures what matters. I mean, it's data, and it has a role, and I think every council is different, but it says a picture, but it doesn't paint, you know, doesn't give you a full context. It's on its own, in isolation, it's not enough.
Yeah, I think census data is a government tool to actually elicit investment into communities. So if I'm going to put my bureaucrat hat in, you need to have census data, particularly in planning. But it's a 5-year lag data. So we've just got our latest census data set, and that's not even considered around the next round of funding for investment around the grant programs that are coming out. So it's a tool that's used in different areas, and it's about investment, basically, and it's about a data set that is consistent across, God, I sound like the bureaucrat, across the state. So I'm saying, yes, you need to understand your census data is my bottom line. But what I would say to you, it's about being relevant and meaningful data. And I sometimes challenge what do? You do an annual customer survey, which is about citizen sentiment around service delivery. Sorry, I'm learning. I just reckon that's BS. Oh, I'm being controversial. The reason why I think it's BS because it only touches the surface. And if you don't delve underneath that surface, all you only get is a very high-level view around a customer sentiment. And if you live in where you live, and I think regional's a bit different, if you don't delve down a little bit deeper, all you're getting is a very vanilla view of your community. And I'm happy to be challenged back, by the way. If you think that's not BS and I need to go back in my box, please tell me. I'm very happy to be told to go back into my box. But my point is census data is around just being at the table. A customer satisfaction survey or citizen view survey is just the top level and is quite vanilla. If you really want to understand what your community is, I think you have to really actively seek relevant data insights that build a case for change. So where's my data insights? My data insights at my customer service desk, who actually interact with customers every single day. How are they capturing that data? My data set is when mum and dad pick up the kids from the childcare centre and have that conversation with the childcare worker. My data set is the disability house where I've got COVID rampant in one of my houses and how we're managing that for our level of service. My level of service agreement, and I apologise to Orange City Council for sharing this, when it comes to our childcare centres is that we're open 5 days a week. That's my view of a customer service survey. Did I answer the question? So census data,
look,
I've got
think it
vanilla
is.
data. I think you need to
I think
delve down.
I'm going to be controversial in return because I think there's customer survey, there's annual community surveys, but then there's annual community surveys. I think there's a lot of variety across the board, and I'm going to speak directly about the catalysed scorecard that we undertook last year because that went into service areas and furthermore, it gave us a voice bank from each person that responded. They were able to free text into their top 3 priority service areas. So we now have tens of thousands of words directly from our community around each of their important priority areas. So what are they saying about our roads? And we've got so it's not just roads in general, but now we've got really specific priorities directly from our community. If you had have asked anybody at council, how do you think the community feels safe and about safety? They were like, oh yeah, it's safe. Well, no, actually. In our community survey, people had really major concerns about safety and the perception of safety in Wallandilly because there was no manned police station. Now, what can council do about that? Not a lot. But that is really important for us to understand, for us to then communicate and create a conversation around safety, around we do a quarterly crime stats thing with the police and how can we then deliver to that. So I agree. I also want to shout out to council. We're really resource strapped, right? So if you had $1 million budget to do marketing, you do focus groups, you do all of the fancy things. But if you don't have a lot of money, you need to be really, really tight and really, really strategic about how you spend that. And so by doing a really good annual community survey, doing it year on year to create that benchmark, and maybe then also doing the LG professionals performance excellence program for benchmarking across councils, you're starting to build a bit of a data set. Do you know? I'm not paid to say any of that. But I'm saying that because we, at Wallandilly, we've started a journey around, okay, how do we start making evidence-based decisions? And what can we use? We don't have a big budget, so we're going to use a really, really kick-ass community survey that's going to get really good data. We're going to invest in a program that enables us to that's going to enable us to benchmark against other councils and then pick up the phone and call Coffs Harbour because you're similar to us and it's really interesting. Anyway, I could go on, but just to be controversial.
I was going to say, before we go down and ask some questions, Luke, would you?
I'm sitting here in the middle, and I'm sitting quietly because I have to be honest, I failed Stat 151 at uni, and so data isn't my specialty. But I actually come out of an online webinar last week on census data, and what they can do with it blew my mind. But I think if I can bring it back, the critical piece is that there's data overload. And so it's what do we do with that data, what's meaningful for our community. And if I'm a community member and I've obviously participated in the census, I may not be answering the questions based on, my love of my local government area. Where if I'm answering my biannual community satisfaction survey, that when I pick up the phone, I'm told that this relates to, Lake Macquarie City, and the questions that we ask you will help, service delivery in the future, then I believe that raw data is going to be more valuable than, picking up data sets that your community hasn't been informed of, that, we're asking you these to improve services in your local government area. So I don't have a lot to add on this, but I'm mindful that there is so much data being thrown around that it's critical that your community has had buy-in to that data that you're interrogating to improve your local government area.
And I suppose just one point, if I can, just be careful of the whitewash, because the way you gather data and who you hear from may not mean that you're listening to every voice or getting the voices that you need to hear. That's the only point I kind of want to make. And I think these are all great tools. I'm not an advocate against the tools. We need tools and we need insights and we need data. I just sometimes think that if we stop at that and we think that's what the whole story is, that we might be creating a whitewash, that's all.
No, I think that came across in the discussion today, is that how do we ensure that all voices are heard or have that opportunity, and there's different mechanisms. We've got a bit of time left. Has anyone got any burning question or challenge that you'd like to make?
Questions, and remember, we need to talk into the microphone. Prue, thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. I'm interested if any of you have engaged with your elected representatives about when you've done a big engagement project, how do they like to receive that data, and what is useful in terms of informing effective decision making? Particularly when it might not be the kind of information that doesn't necessarily align with what they're hearing from their noisy voices.
Our councillors love a workshop. They love a bloody good workshop, and have to have a workshop of everything. How do they engage? Or before you engage, let's have a workshop. While you're engaging, let's have a... No, I'm just kidding. But for real, that's how so after any major big, engagement that we undertake with the community, it would be a workshop, a briefing, a councillor briefing. And to the point around, you're hearing this, but this is what the data is saying. I think it's really important to acknowledge that both things can be right. That there will be people in the community that do believe in this, but we cannot ignore that the vast majority of voices that we heard during this community engagement have said this, and it's a really tricky line it's a really tricky area to navigate, and I'm keen to understand how you guys do that. But it's really just coming back to, this is what we've heard, this is what our recommendation is, and then as council suggesting the ideal solution based on the data that's in front of us.
Yeah, very similar. So I think it was in February this year, we ran with Jenny's team, obviously with, like all of you did, a comprehensive councillor induction program. Part of that was an extensive introduction to community engagement at our organisation, how we do it, what sort of projects we do it on, and the type of feedback that we receive. So I guess before it gets to a councillor meeting, there's always potentially a number of briefings that have been had. First one may be on the approach that you're planning on undertaking, if it's going to be a significant project, and then a briefing with a high-level overview of the feedback we received. The council report steps out what we did to engage our community, how many people we engaged via social media, submissions or surveys completed, and then the attachment to that council report, as well as the draft strategy, if it's going to be adopted, is either a response to every submission, if it's under a certain number, or if it's over, response to key themes. So they get a good sense of what we are hearing from the community. The decision that we might make might not be of a consensus, but it's about giving them the information to make an informed decision, basically.
I think we're at a level of immaturity in the way we present data to our council, if I was going to be frank. But I think for where we are at the moment, it is mature enough to enable transparent decision making. So we have the situation in regards to engagement, where we might have a big project, and we've done all of the consultants' reports. We've done exactly the same sort of path of the briefings and then the engagement report that goes to it, which then has your quantitative and your qualitative data that's presented. The reality is all of that stuff is just giving a slither of the vocal voice and not actually the actualisation of the community sentiment. So the way that we do this is our mayor wakes up in the morning and he looks at his Facebook page. By the way, Facebook is dead. Can everyone tell their councils that Facebook is dead? And that all it is it has its tiny segmentation of those people that are probably 40 to 60 white male on it. Again, I'm being controversial. We're going to TikTok as our way of actually gathering community sentiment. I'm not joking. We will. Instagram is dying unless you want to be fast. Anyhow, I won't go. Anyhow, so what I'm trying to say is we can do all of that, but the reality is for us on a daily practical basis, the mayor will get something on Facebook. He'll go, the world is falling down. We will go, here's our engagement report. The world is not falling down, and then we have to turn around and have to actually encourage and advocate for where we're up to and go through a process. If I was just going to be real about it, where would I like to get to? One-page executive reporting that looks at multiple data sets from multiple channels and hears all the voices in the community. Will I get there this year? No. Will I get here in 5 years? I don't know. Can we get there together maybe in 3 years? I don't know, but it's hard. It's just hard. And so if you go to the revolution, where you're talking to your community every day and there's inputs coming in every day through different channels, it's a better place to make an argument and a debate and to give that sense of security for your elected representatives. That's kind of my view.
Hi, I'm Anna from Tamworth Council, and my question is for you, Rochelle. You mentioned before that you utilise impromptu feedback from various locations, whether it be customer service teams or childcare centres or wherever it might be. How do you aggregate that information into something meaningful that can inform decisions?
Yeah. I'm not doing it right now at council, but I can talk to you about how we've done it previously. So if you go into the Premier's website and you know the thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism that you have on issues. So we looked at this. Can I give a state example? Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody if I do a state example? Yeah, okay. So we were looking at kind of how do we actually get citizen engagement and really get a citizen's view on policy making, and we couldn't do it in any formal way that we do now in our engagement frameworks. So there was this amazing man who was leading he was the Customer Service Commissioner, and he said, why don't we just chuck stuff on the website that we're doing and maybe just let people give an opinion. So thumbs up, thumbs down, that's it. And if you wanted to put a comment in, you can. So you just get this very quick litmus test on sentiment around, a project or initiative or a program of work. So that's what I call the beginning of citizen-led engagement or citizen-led policy making. So you're just constantly getting a view. Then you go into big data. We don't have the money in local government. So has anyone done the big data kind of geo-fencing, sentiment mapping? Oh, it's so fabulous, but we need like millions of dollars to do it. So at any point in time, I could go into my big data sets and go, in this area here, I'm going to listen to conversations on social media and get themes around that. And so then we built a platform, a digital platform that was championed by the Minister for Customer Service, where we could pick any issue, political issue or policy position, and get a sentiment read like that. Then we could deep dive. Can we do that in local government? No. So I'm trying to massage it to having conversations, aggregating those conversations in a thematic way, and then building those conversations through touch points across the community. It's pretty basic, but I think it's a start. Yeah.
Thank you.
Unless you've got another view, and I'd be really happy to hear it.
Hi, how are you? Belinda from Cessnock Council. I'm new to local government. I come from federal government, and I've only been with local government for 3 months in IPR. Can you connect this for me to IPR, what I do, like this community engagement?
Oh my God, welcome. Hi, you're like me. So connecting community engagement to IPR. Sorry, I just jumped in. So this is my interpretation, you're going to have 60 other interpretations in the room, and so please use these moments as as a learning opportunity. I think that would be, and especially in CESNOC, right? So you've got really interesting council. Try to find other. Anyway, I'm telling you stuff you already know. Community engagement, IPR. Community engagement is like the basis of IPR, I believe, because it defines, community engagement helps us to define the current context of our community, defines the challenges, it defines the vision, and so then that is on the basis of what everything else is done, right? So then community engagement helps us to articulate what the community's vision is in our beautiful community strategic plan, and then the council hear that and like, okay, well then we're going to plan a couple of things and we'll pop them in a delivery program based on what you've said. And I think another really important part of the integrated planning and reporting part is the reporting, which is a really important part of community engagement, because it's the part where we tell the community, hey, this is what we've done, we've heard you, this is what we've done, and it's using that as regularly as you can. So that is how I would connect the dots. It's basically, it's the content of the plans. Does that help? Yes.
I guess just to sum it up, I have a job because of IPR, basically. Everything that I engage on with our community is a result of the integrated planning and reporting framework.
And I just wanted to make one point. This is not council's plan, so the community strategic plan is not council's plan. And I think the challenge as a professional working now, I'll take it, my challenge as a professional coming from different lens like federal government, is how do you contextualise that for your organisation? So the engagement is about hearing what your community's vision is, their voice, their wants, their needs. Somehow managing that with, well, what's the business of council? I need roads, rates and rubbish. And then it's kind of, well, how can we deliver some of those needs? And some of those things we can't deliver. So we're currently having a debate, I think a lot of people are, about affordable housing, the housing crisis. My community strategic plan has the top 10 big, hairy social problems that my community wants us to solve. We need to go back to the community and say, we can advocate on your behalf, but housing affordability is a state government issue. If you're looking at about enabling infrastructure, that's fed and state. And I know I'm kind of championing different levels of government, but that's why it's really important to have those relationships in government. And the other thing it might be, well, you know what, we want a child-safe community. Well, what's your role as a community member around that? So I just wanted to make that contextualisation. It's the community plan, and then we hear that from the engagement piece, but then we also deliver the delivery plan and operational plan is what we're going to do, what we can do as part of that. And for us, we had 15 new themes come out because of the different alignment and timing. And in some of those 15 new themes, we've basically said in our delivery program, we're not doing anything in it. That's hard to go back to your community and go, yeah, big, scary, hairy, audacious problem, but it's, you know, we can't do anything about that, but we can support you, you know, and advocate for you. Does that make sense to you?
We have Rachel here, and I think, do we have one or two more questions over there? Maybe Rachel and one more there, and then I'm conscious of eating into Gavin's time, so I don't want to do that.
I'll just move straight to my question then. One of the great challenges for corporate strategy people in local government or comms or whoever's responsible for running the annual scorecard or survey can be about how to take that information and get the service areas, particularly line managers, to come together and respond to that information. And a lot of the time it can be met with defensiveness from hard-working managers that think they've done well and they see it as criticism coming back. So I'm just interested from the panel if you've got a really great example about how you've done that well or how you do that internally once you get that feedback, and use those managers to then inform a strategic response.
I'll let you go first. Come on, Luke, this is yours.
I wish I had a great answer for you. We've been fortunate that a number of managers who have struggled with community engagement in the past have sort of, I guess, seen the light to some extent. And so I know I'm not answering your question directly, but they've taken feedback from, you know, by your community satisfaction survey where the community identified that they want engagement to be transparent. So as a result, instead of going out and exhibiting a draft strategy as a fait accompli, they're taking 2 steps back and they're enabling the community to have buy-in to the process. So I'll use dogs in open space strategy. I know it's not an exciting topic, but it seems to really get the interest of the community, and sometimes not in a good way. So instead of exhibiting a draft strategy, they've come around through discussions, through higher up managers, through discussions with us around the importance and the value of good community engagement. So they've gone out early in the piece. It might be an operational plan target for the 12 months, so they haven't waited until, let's say April, towards the end of the financial year. They've identified it early. They've identified that it could be a risk. So they've gone out multiple times to the community to ensure buy-in, to ensure that by the time it gets on public exhibition, the community's had buy-in, the process has been transparent, and the draft strategy goes through the exhibition period with feedback and with some changes, but the level of outrage has been reduced, and the organisational risk to the council has been reduced because they've bought into the importance of community engagement, because the community have identified that they believe engagement needs to be transparent and they need to be involved early in the process. So I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but that's just an example that I've encountered with our organisation. Managers who didn't see the value of community engagement have done a 360 because they can see what the end result can be if engagement is done well from the outset.
Yeah, we have a challenge at Wallandilly. In terms of our management team, there's a really good, there's a couple of them who are really committed. I call it the committed and compliance stage. You've got the managers who are compliant and they're just ticking in a box, and they're the ones that are really hard at, trying to get them engaged in the process, and then you've got some that are really committed and that really understand the process. And so the process that we undertook, and look, I'll pay you later, Rachel. Rachel and I work together at Wallandilly, so she understands the context at Wallandilly, and I'm sure this is not a unique context. I'm sure a lot of other people feel this as well. But what worked really successfully for us at Wallandilly is having regular workshops with the managers, taking them from the conception, like where we've gotten this data from, all of the consultation that we had, the scorecard that we did. So so then bring them and making them have input, making them lean in and being part of the solution. What goes into the delivery program is what you own. So you need to put your name against this. So you need to speak up. You need to have a voice, so that by the end of the thing, it's not just something that Rachel and I did. It's something that they all did. And for me, success was when we went out to public exhibition and we did what was called community sundowners, or we went out to the community. We brought our CSP alive. Every single manager showed up to be part of that. They showed up to have conversations with the community. And so for me, that was them physically saying that they're, representing the plan.
I'm not surprised you and Luke had to, the private bit makes a lot of sense when we think of the organisations that you're working in. You've got some very pragmatic, practical, managers and people out there. That's going to be the...
And I think this is where the KPI stuff comes into, and it's Rachel, by the way, I just let everyone know. Some people have been calling Rachel. So Rachel to Rachel, are you actually asking the question about if you get a customer service satisfaction survey come back and they say, for example, we're very displeased with our development services area because, they are not approving DAs on time and they are actually impacting on my, housing developments or, my ability to build. So that's a real example for us. We don't actually have... a annual citizen satisfaction survey. I think we might need one as part of the IPR one, Kathleen, you know that one down. And that's why I was trying to say about how do we gather intelligence. And so an example about providing that feedback around a poor level of citizen expectation versus what you can actualise, and then how do you actually manage staff morale around that? And we all know who can get a planner, by the way. If anyone can get a planner, please let me know. It is just so challenging to get resources. So we had some very, and it was through a community, very negative and nasty feedback around our ability to approve DAs in a timely manner and the impact that it was having in development on Orange. That went to our elected representatives, so there was that, that crisis bit that we all talked about, the issue management piece. And we had to be really careful in how do we communicate that. And we have actually a program that we've started. It hasn't got very far because we were always distracted by the things we need, the next thing we need to do. But it's a really difficult conversation to be having at a ELT level with, my direct colleagues and my CEO to say, how do we handle this? Because our people are hearing this from our community, that they're not doing a good job, they think they're not doing a good job, where they're actually doing a bloody incredible job. And we don't have enough planners there. And the risk for us was, how do you manage that situation? Because our people could just leave. And if you want to talk about, the whole thing around building surveyors and the certification and the compliance piece, I mean, oh my God, like trying to keep someone to do your construction certificates out there at the moment is just unbelievable. So how do we manage that? How do we actually do that? It's about, I think, recognising what our performance level is with our resources at doing it the best we can do and actually being accountable to the public. So we went back to the Master Building Associations and said, you know what, buddy, you're like, this is what we're doing for you, here's the data, here's how many DAs we're getting through, and quite frankly, if you need it to get quicker, you might have to go and employ Johnny Boy up the road. That's going to cost you a heap more money to get that done. At least it also showed that we were standing up for our people in the work. The language was much better than my colloquialism. So how do you manage that? Other examples, rubbish collection. We had some poor service delivery in rubbish collection. We got that through our front counter, went through a CRM, and the team went, yep, noted, this is not up to standard. Bang, they went and fixed it, and we communicated directly to the public about, what was going to be done. So I think it's a bit of both. And that's why I know I might have a different view to some people, but that's why I'm saying a community satisfaction survey at that top level can be quite dangerous, but can also be quite empowering. How do you deliver those messages?
We have a final question.
Yeah, thank you. Kaylee from Bega Valley Shire Council. I'm interested in the panel's understanding of managing expectations and what you've done in that space. I think sometimes in IPR, we raise that bar quite high, we go to the community, it's quite aspirational with the CSP. Sometimes I think to our detriment, we're raising that bar. We have really tried to focus a lot more energy and effort in our resourcing strategy and really drawing that line and making that a focus. So I'm interested to know what your councils have been doing in that space and managing expectations.
I love that you're using the resourcing strategy for that purpose. I think that is a really powerful tool to use to educate on this is everything that we need. Like, we've got all of these projects and actions, but actually this is the actual staffing, that we need to, and this is the finances that we have. I think the resourcing strategy is a really underrated tool that we can use to help, because really managing expectations is around being really clear in our communication about what we can deliver and what we can't deliver, right? So the resourcing strategy is a good tool to use. I think any time when you can add any kind of finances to the conversation to help that management of expectations discussion. So it's like, okay, well, we've got a pie that's this big and we've got all of these things that we want to do, and we can only cut up the pie so much, we can't make a bigger pie. We have to make some tough decisions, and we need you to be part of that. So, good. Anyway.
Look, we probably are going to have to leave it there.
Oh, no.
Oh. I mean, we can continue the conversation. It's a great thing about this event. We've got the time, we're not just here for a day or an overnight. There's plenty of time to continue these conversations and have one-on-ones. I'm sure they will. But I really want to thank Michelle, Luke and Rachel for being provocative, for having a real stimulating conversation. Thank you very much, and won't end here.
That was a great conversation, and please give Matt a big round of applause for facilitating that conversation and asking questions.